We are Econet. I am Andrius Kulikauskas with Montijn van Loo, Ben Vries, Jere Northrop, Steph Macurdy. We're investigators. We have a culture of investigation. And so today we have a breakthrough that Montijn van Loo will talk about. And so we'll discuss that. If we have time, then we'll talk about counter questions and doubts
Good,
like last time.
sure.
Montijn, please.
Um, so the breakthrough, thank you for calling it that, is just what I felt like it would have been a very nice message to give me as an eccentric thinker a long time ago to be able to share my ideas with other people. So the thing is that you really are going to work with an audience to make them understand a question, make them understand the importance of the question, and then also see perhaps if they are also invested in it. And then once that desire, that curiosity has manifested, then you can start about, asking, okay, I have this kind of answer. Do you agree? Do you not agree? Do you have your own answers? How did we compare? But then that discussion, which they will then happen afterwards, will be understood and what it is supposed to do. You're already understanding, okay, what's supposed to answer to be? Does it fill the gap created by the question? So I think that is the moment we can actually talk about answers. But before we've reached that point, we should really remain totally silent about any answers we have and first make sure that we got that first step correct. We understand the question. So the answer should really be postponed. So that's the essentially the idea. And then I think there are two interesting ways to evoke that question in by the audience. But that's the starting premise. So if no more questions, if that's clear for everybody, I think maybe, and I think also for discussion, and we'll go into the methods. So one is just say the question, explain the question, talk about it, and try to find a vocabulary, a common ground that you think, all right, now I do feel that this is the question I understand. The other thing is, and it's more for technology, is just show what you can do with this knowledge eventually. So that question does not come explicitly by asking you and saying this is the question, but rather that question comes from within. You see something and you just wonder, how did they do that? And then that question is also inside the heads of the audiences. So both ways are just ways to get the questions out of the audiences. And perhaps if that's clear until now, we can just apply it and see. But yeah, so we can just apply it. And I think one interesting example is how what I'm talking now, because essentially I've been talking now in answers. This is how you do these things. But to what question do my answers serve here? Well, the question is, how do I share my ideas with an audience, right? And if then now we can talk about, okay, does that question make sense to you all? Do you know what I mean with that question? How do I share my ideas with the audience? I have certain ideas. I would like them to talk about it, appreciate it, enter them into my little sandbox, which I have been struggling in so for such a long time. So how do I do that? And then the answer I just spoke are then supposedly the fills that which fills the gap created by that question. So that's like one example, but I think the most interesting example is to apply that method on really our big questions. So to do that, before I do that, say, is everybody clear and on point in what we're trying to do? And then I can try to apply it on my own work. Then we can go to other people's work, to Jerry, to perhaps Steph, to Benjamin, to Andrius, and then we can see if how that technique will fall out. So for Steph, it's clear. For everybody, is it clear what we're trying to do?
Well, I just want to distinguish maybe two parts. One is applying what you're proposing, like to practice it, right? To see if it works. The other is to discuss it to see what people think about it, right?
Um,
Which one do you want to do, or do you want to have time for both?
yeah, so I think also I think it's more common in academics to do the explicit method. So I ask a question and I will talk about the question and I will try to explain the question and see if you guys can understand the question and appreciate the question before I move to the answers. Because, in practice, yeah, that's a lot of times really down the road. So I will go for the explicit method.
I didn't understand you. So you're talking about which question?
Uh, So I'm gonna go over certain questions. So I have certain ideas I would like to transfer to you, ideas of my work, and I would like to introduce those ideas via first talking about a certain question and making you guys understand the question.
Okay, so you're going to practice your own medicine. You're going to say that
Yes,
you're trying to communicate to us, and you're going to use the method of the question, right? And then you
yes.
want to do that. So just before you do that, maybe could people have a chance to just give their impressions so far of what they've heard
Yeah, yeah,
from
yeah, indeed,
you?
indeed.
Okay.
Yes, yes. So if nobody wants, then I will just continue.
Oh, I'd like to
Oh, go on.
Jerry, Steph, Ben, do you have anything to say about this whole thing? Like, what are your comments so far?
Nothing so far.
It's what we're starting to do, right? And
What do
this
you
is the
mean?
beginning of getting it under motion.
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, then
All
why
right,
don't
let's
you
go.
why don't you sh be your own guinea pig and show how you
Yes,
do that?
yes, yes.
Well,
Um,
Andres, weren't you going to say something?
Uh, I just think I think I kind of said what that there's so many directions to go, and this is very fertile. But let's take this direction. Montaigne's ready. I wrote in my letter, some of the directions, but I think this is good.
so
Continue.
oh, sorry, yes. So I kind of lied. I won't. I will first let the guinea pig be the free energy principle. I do this for the reason that also my subsequent questions will not only be, judged in isolation. Okay, the question of itself, but you can also think, oh, I'm actually kind of answering the same question that the free energy principle does, but just a bit different. So you can even leverage that intuition to make sense of the question. So in that light, um, the question I believe that the financial principle tries to answer is, given a current state of a living system, and the system, this question is loaded. These terms all have very peculiar meanings. Living is like self-organization, blah blah blah. But given a current state of a living system, what template do we use to explain its dynamics? So we are in a world and we see these living systems, self-organizing systems, do all kind of weird thingies, and we're trying to answer, okay, how do we even begin at answering that question? Can we even imagine what an answer would look like? And essentially, the free energy principle can be seen as a kind of generalization from the principle of least action, which does the exact same trick. So for people who have a little bit of physics background, you ask in physics, an object does a certain motion, and then you ask, okay, how do I even imagine how such an answer would look like? And then a principle of least action says, well, it's minimizing least action. And then we see, okay, so how does then the answer concretely look like? Not in general, like template like, but concretely, well, there is a certain kind of landscape of potential kinetic energy, and then you have to find the Lagrangian, and you can limit it by symmetries, but whatever. But you know already what the kind of answer would look like. You know that the object would always minimize least action, and now you know how it would look like. It would look like a kind of Lagrangian which is just going down. So the free energy principle does that, but does that essentially not by saying Lagrangian, but rather whatever the dynamics of this living system, the answer would look always like minimizing the free energy principle for certain generative models. So you also know always that answer would look something like that. And then the discussion can become what kind of generative models and how can we, just like physics, leverage all kind of information like symmetries, etc., given a certain context. How we can do that in the free energy principle to also constrain via psychology, neurology, the kind of generative models. But that is the essence of the free energy principle, I believe. It's just a template for the dynamics of living systems. Oh, I actually, now I think about it, I already skipped I gave the question first and then gave the answer immediately. But anyways, so the question is, given the current state of a living system, what template for explanatory dynamics? So that's the question, and then you can leverage from physics. It's doing the same thing, and then the free energy principle comes as answer. Aha, this is the template. And why do we want to do this? Well, having this template in physics gave a lot of insights because you could compare all these answers because they were written in the same kind of language. So in physics, a lot of symmetries, a lot of relationships were discovered, like the theory of Noether, which could say like symmetries imply conservation laws and vice versa. That was only possible in this common language. So that's also the reason why we would like that with the living systems. So free energy principle does that. Okay, so that's like the guinea pig was now the free energy principle. Is it clear for everybody what we're trying to do? First, understand the question, why it is necessary, why we would like it. We can leverage physics from that, and then introduce the answer, the free energy principle. And then let's apply it, if no one has anything to say, to my question of my work. So,
Just to jump in.
yeah.
So one crucial thing to add to that, and you mentioned like about you struggling in your sandbox, right? Like, you struggle in your sandbox, then you have an idea, then you want to present your idea. So I think a crucial part for our culture, at least the crucial part that I'm trying to emphasize, is sharing that struggle in the sandbox. You see, like, how is it, like in the case of the free energy principle, how is it that they came to that conclusion? What was the process by which they decided that this is the free energy principle? Instead of just saying, oh, just, voila, right? Like, to say no, that there's a step by step, there's a whole struggling in the sandbox that does it.
It's true.
And in terms of communicating, that makes for a lot richer communication because you can see the internal world of the person who's sharing,
I see.
and you can participate in
I
that
see.
internal world.
You,
It's not all or nothing.
I think two ways. Like there are two aims. One is just also discussed history to increase understandability of answer. So in that way, history is relevant, but you can also just talk about the history just for just the beauty of the journey in of itself. But all in all, these are strategies on explaining the answer. Right now, we are primarily focused on explaining the question. So I do agree with you, and these strategies are important, but that's in the second phase. Once the question is understood.
I'm trying to say there's a third angle. Like, how does the question become the answer? That whole journey, you see. So how does the question break down, or how does the answer build up, or that thing? Like that. There's a whole journey, which that's what I'm trying to interject.
All right.
But
See.
continue.
And not only that the question goes to an answer, but from answers more questions.
True.
And that this is, unless you have arrived at the answer that satisfies you completely, and there are then no more questions after that.
You make a very good point, and I would like to perhaps be more explicit about this. These questions are essentially the starting questions on the journey. These are like the first questions we need to understand for the audience to start this journey, because then because the same will be my work. I have like essentially two kind of starting questions, and once you have those answers, then indeed new questions sprout, and then the process somewhat iterates. It just restarts again. So it's really, and I'm really meaning this for our project, for the eccentric thinker, it's really about the starting question. What's the first question they need to have to begin the journey? All right, so let's indeed start it.
Let me ask a little bit for clarification.
Yeah.
You started with, given the current state of a living system, what are the dynamics of this system?
Yeah.
So now the question is, what do you mean by dynamics? Do you mean what the system actually does? Do you mean what the system decides?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So essentially, what we're now going to discuss is actually part of the explanation of the question. And that's a good question. So let me just clarify to make you understand it. So if you understand what a living system is, because there's like a self-organization, and we essentially can go into very statistical terms to like Carl Friston does that. Then the dynamics are nothing more than you have a current state, and that state evolves over time. So essentially, you talk about certain trajectories. It can be one singular change in discrete time, or continuous changes. And you're just asking yourself, why does it make these kind of changes and not those kind of changes? And that why question is GM.
You're talking about the dynamics then in terms of the physical changes that the living system is going to do.
So yeah, it needs, for every point in time, you have a current state of the living system, and it evolves over time. Yes.
I may,
Suppose you can't really totally describe the system just in terms of how it physically changes in any given time. How does that?
Essentially, I'm talking about a very general system formulation in the most general sense that physics uses. So you can.
So, yeah, you're going at it from a physics standpoint.
Yeah. Yes, I'm really using that general system, dynamical system formulation. So it's very general.
Okay.
So this because essentially to talk about system changes, you first have to ascribe properties to a system. It can be the coordinates. It can be temperature. It can be all kind of things. And every time, so then when you let it evolve, those properties change. This can most of the time be quantified. And then you can just ask yourself, why did it make those kind of changes over time and not other kind of changes?
Okay, and then by a living system, you mean something like you and I?
Yes, we are examples of a living system, and in virtue of us resisting entropy. So when we are cut, we regenerate.
Got it. If I may,
yes.
This makes me think of bioeconomics, in which we're following all of the elements of a system with a certain knowledge of the mechanics of that system, requirements for metabolic processes and such. And the final goal of most bioeconomics is to find the limiting nutrient of that system. So any system which could be made larger by adding the correct limiting nutrient, and this could be on the cell level, this could be on the ecosystem level. Surface water of the ocean, phytoplankton is a good example, where the limiting nutrient is iron, and the growth rate can be caused to increase dramatically with introduction of very small amount of iron. Is one example, but there are many.
For me, this is new, but I would like to appreciate that knowledge. Perhaps when I'm done with my questions, we can turn to like what is the question of bioeconomics. I feel that this perhaps to do with but I just read an idea, but we can turn to that. We can because it's new to me, and I would like to be introduced to it by this method. That would be a nice experiment, I would say.
And just to jump in, that what Montain's doing is he's saying, okay, the free energy principle, it's very deep, let's say, maybe very abstruse, but he's saying, look, let's think of it in terms of the question that makes it interesting, which is like the dynamics of living systems. And then it turns out, oh, bioeconomics has a similar question. So you can start to look at things, how they connect in terms of questions.
Yes.
And there's this attitude of not knowing. So from that attitude of not knowing, you can still come up with lots of connections between different fields. We don't know this, we don't know that. How are they related? And then you separate that from the idea of knowing. Okay, so free energy principle offers a very particular theory, or like in bioeconomics, you're saying like, well, the nutrient, that is going to be key. Let's say that's the answer. So Montaigne's separating this out, and then he's going to give his own example now in terms of his.
Yeah. Yes, and I do think it's very interesting to look at connections between questions, because essentially I am leveraging a connection between the question we had just discussed and the question I will now discuss. Being so the starting question of my one of the starting questions of my research is, given the current state of our conscious experience and bridge laws, what template to explain its dynamics? So essentially we have switched just the object of study from a living system to our current state of experience, our conscious experience. And essentially we can apply the same trick, but to make you understand the question, to really understand it, you have to first understand what do you mean with the current state of our living experience. We can talk about that, for a living system. Can we even talk about our current state of our conscious experience? Because that in and of itself is contested. And if I fail you to even make you accept that, now I can talk about the answer, but it won't do anything. So we see this can be a discussion. What is the I mean with the current conscious? Like, I want to say it shortly in a minute. The current state of our conscious experience essentially if you just look at the total state of our, at the moment, right now, perception and all our cognition and everything that you feel right now at this moment, the total phenomenology. So look at look at the picture, just look at the current state of your visual field right now, and add your auditive field and all your other senses to it. That makes one big field. Add your memories, add your expectations, add your thinking, just what you feel right now. And that totality, that approximate, if you continue adding facts to it, to your current state of your conscious experience. And then you just ask yourself, well, this conscious experience just changes over time. And then why does it make those kind of changes and not the other kind of changes? And that we also ask ourselves, okay, how do we even begin with answering such a question? How do we even formulate, and what kind of template should we use to answer that question if you agree that we can acknowledge the current state of consciousness? And then, the answer will also contain somewhat the free energy principle, but also formology. I believe formology, which is a work of mine, to be necessary to even introduce the free energy principle. So I'm not going to talk about what formology is. Let's first talk about if you can understand the question. So who has still questions about the question? Do we understand the question or not?
I think I understand the question, and I think it's saying why, if we're looking at the current state of conscious experience, then that question potentially pulls you outside of conscious experience, looking down on conscious experience.
Yes.
And if that happens, you can potentially call that two minds. And then if you're in the mind looking down on conscious experience and not in conscious experience, then you potentially also have the opportunity to oscillate between the two, which would give you a third perspective. And I'm purposefully saying this in the way that I understand it from Andrius, because
interesting.
That gives you a the very lightweight third perspective is a bit flip between two things, and it's very minimal.
I really like this connect, and I would like to Andrius also to comment on this. But before I do that, let's make sure at least we are on the same page, because I do think you address something very interestingly. The thing is that when you step essentially out of the experience and look at the current state of experience, that in a sense is also a kind of experience. So you remain it's just that you take a certain attitude. Your attentional networks in your brain are just a bit different. You make more reflective things, and you get this feeling, okay, now I'm in a state of reflecting. But all in all, you remain a trajectory inside of space of our conscious experiences. It's just that now you just flip to you enter a different kind of event, a different kind of subset. And it's just that, and in that sense, when you talk about the first mind, the second mind, yes, sure, you can define the first mind as the event in conscious state of experiences, which contain all experiences where you do not reflect, and then the second mind as the subset where you do reflect, and then the third mind, which perhaps also take a temporal past into event when you alternate between the two. But all in all, the playing field, in all cases, is a conscious experience.
I see what you're saying. So that, to me, would suggest that if I'm looking at the state of conscious experience, and when I do that, I'm in a subset of total conscious experience. It sounds like to me that you're then making available many different possible subsets simultaneously.
Yes.
At some degree, at some level, I won't be able to hold, or at some level, there would be too many.
Are you talking about when you iterate the reflection? So essentially you can partition conscious experience states in like a limiting set where you are continuously entering a different set. And because this is a theoretical, because now by the way, we are kind of diverting from the question and more interested in like what kind of events we can define. This is very important for our second question, which is all about how can we describe kind of events, because that's also very important for the transfer of insights with the physical events, because essentially that's the study of consciousness science to get those bridge laws. But all in all, there's a short note. I don't believe that I think that this limiting is more a mathematical speciality than actually something that tracks our experiences, because indeed we just have these ecological, biological constraints, and I don't think indeed we can go down this infinite path, because indeed we are just biological constraints. I might even say that there's only reflection and no reflection, because I feel like reflection is just still reflection all the same. It's just that you reflect on a different kind of experience. So for me, it's a nice thought experiment, but I'm satisfied with this. But that's something we can talk about. But now you understand at least. But before we can move on, we can now really enjoy a discussion where we know what we're talking about. And that in of itself, that we're discussing now on something quite intimately and quite nuanced, really, I think is something wonderful, because then we understand we can talk about the same kind of ideas. I do not feel lonely anymore in my sandbox now I'm talking with you, So that's in itself also, I really like it. But yeah, so
and I think that's like a personal breakthrough for you, and it's a community breakthrough for us to be able to try to talk about these things. And I think the fundamentalness of the question you have, like, the state of a living experience or conscious experience, like, is that it's going into, I mean, the thing that's the topic is also very much the thing that you have to master in order to be able to communicate, etc. So it's very tricky. And so it takes it's very good we're getting here, that we have this practice. So one of the points to make is that the whole notion of moving to questions, like, so let's say, okay, answers we have, but like, thinking in terms of questions, what that does, it kind of makes it explicitly like verbal or symbolic or whatever. It removes us from from just being satisfied with direct experience. So, because an answer could be just you show somebody something, or you take them somewhere, or you give them something. They don't have to have words, or they don't have to wait to have a symbolize it. They don't have to have formulas or anything. But when you go into the world of questions, you're going into a world where everything becomes symbolic, everything becomes reflected, everything becomes, like verbal. And so it's saying that's a different world. Like, instead of showing, can you make it symbolic? Can you kind of make it formulaic? Can you make it in terms of black boxes? You see, can you make it in terms of what we don't know, let's say, right? So that's a huge shift, and it's very challenging. It forces you to be explicit, and so explicitness is a big challenge. So that's
Okay,
my
yeah.
kind of take on this. And this is just to say that what you're doing is important. We just need to
Oh
let you
yeah,
do it.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
but I'm
so
just saying that there's these very deep things going on here.
I see.
And
So
I
the
and I very
question
much
was
agree
that.
with all the things Steph
Oh,
said. So
okay, good. No,
not
yes,
to
and
load too much on it, but just to say
yes,
that this
good.
is very good.
So
Okay, continue.
let me
Yeah.
just walk you through the other question I have briefly, just so you know these are questions that I'm interested in, and then once that known, we can discuss your questions and see how that also goes. But you see already, so the guinea pig was first the free energy principle. Now I've made the guinea pig myself, and I'm not even talking about the answer. I'm just talking about the question. So let's talk about the other question. I already discussed it somewhat with Steph just now. How to relate experiential and physical events to capture the bridge laws. So we are interested, all right. So because essentially this question is essentially already part of the journey from the first question, because we can only talk about these bridge laws if we even acknowledge that there's a current state of consciousness. We don't have to acknowledge, by the way, a living system. That's not needed for bridge laws. But this is indeed a question we can answer once we have started that journey. So this is not anymore a starting question. This is a question which hinges upon the former question by acknowledging the current state of our conscious experience. But essentially, this is what the conscious science do. We can talk about physical events, so your brain in a certain state, and we can talk about your conscious experience, which is in a certain state. We can define events on the state spaces, which is a subset, and we can then talk about, okay, how do these relate with each other? So that's the second question. It's a very empirical
And
somewhat, but that's
one thing we can do, just as we walk this journey, is to try to translate the questions into slightly different languages or whatever, to see if we're still understanding or talking about. So what I understand you to say is that typically, and in consciousness sciences especially, There are two layers. So there's like a physical, neurological layer of explanation, or phenomena to say, look, we've got these brain waves, we've got these
Yeah.
signals, right? But then there's another layer, which is what we report through introspection, through experience to say, hey, I experienced this, I experienced that. And what you call a bridge law is taking you from the one layer to the other layer.
Yes.
And what you're doing is you're establishing, like once we go into the world of questions, we can start to see these structures. It's not all in one, gestalt. It's like you can break down the structures. So you can look at that structures and you can compare it and say, hey, what you talked about, like the answering layer and the questioning layer, there also is like a bridge law there, possibly. You see, how do you convert things that look like answers into things that look like questions? There may be a very similar challenge there, where you could say, oh, what are the
And
bridge laws between? So I'm just saying, like,
I
somebody may
like,
have like, that's kind of like the question I would
but
have.
but
You have this question, but this is how like questions can be related. So
but because okay, I
just an
can
aside, but just an aside. But to say, see, once
yeah,
we go into the language of
but I would like
questions, we can
uh,
compare like how our questions relate. With answers, it's more difficult, but with questions, it's easier to compare, one question with another question, one interest with another
okay.
interest.
So
Just
I'm
to
not,
say.
so
Mhm.
I'm because I'm not fully sure what question you're trying to like to answer here with these answers you're just giving, and I would like to also just go into that. Like, what was the question? Because I cannot really place fully, and I would like to appreciate your answers more by
Mhm.
placing it into a sort of question. If you can keep this thought, I will just quickly go over my
You go
uh
over yours. Hmm.
yes, and then maybe I can come back to this. So that's the first two questions were really about the conscious experience. The last two questions are about morality. So the first question is, what is a moral? And so why do I care? Why should I care about? What is a moral? Well, if we know what a moral is, then we can talk about um, do you have a moral need? How to be a moral person? How to live not only for your pragmatic needs, but how to actually do that in action guiding circumstances. So what are the morals you use to actually effectively guide moral dilemmas to still remain a moral person and whatever that means. So everybody who has a moral need, I think it's interesting to even talk about what is subject matter. So that is one big part of my work. And the other work is essentially just that we know what a moral is. So let's example them, let's spread them, let's discuss them with each other. So we can actually, as a community, investigate what are the morals and what are the morals we should have, and have a livid, good discussion about that. And then, yeah, there are all kind of morals which I like, and we can discuss that. So I don't want to go into that because these questions. I would like also to go into your questions. Before doing that, and does yeah does yeah does
Just to
anyone want
rewind a
to?
bit,
Yeah,
we have the quadrant of knowns, yes?
the
Uh,
quadrant of knowns, the
Knowns and
uh,
unknowns, right?
no,
Or
knowns and unknowns, yes? Okay. So in his hubris, Rumsfeld says that you only mentioned three: the known knowns, the known unknowns, things that you don't know, and the unknown knowns, which are things you don't know. What he missed, of course, was the unknown knowns, things that other people know that you don't know, which is critical lapse for an intelligence advisor. But how do you make a have out of a have not?
so you're especially targeting the unknown knowns here. The question is about that, right?
No, I'm just saying for a codifying matrix, you have the knowns, the quadrant of knowns. Yes.
Ah, I see. I don't think was essentially the three quadrants. If everybody is following the matrix as Benjamin is talking about, uh, I would say that on a psychological level, on an experiential level, if you talk about events in experience space, the only three have place. I don't think we can have an answer. We can understand that answer without a question. I think if you see an answer like to a difficult mathematical project, you just see the letters in and of itself, and perhaps a thing of I don't understand it, and perhaps an idea like okay, perhaps there's valuable knowledge there, but I don't think. Yeah, these are not really the things I would say like that's an unknown. known.
Well, maybe I could try to put it in a different form. Like you've distinguished between thinking in terms of answers and thinking in terms of questions. But these are basically like, with regards to what you know, right? Like, so you know an answer, you know a question. But what Ben is saying is like, and a question kind of invites the thing like, well, shoot, I don't know things. And so maybe there's, how do I communicate or talk about things I don't know? And there's things like I don't even know them, right? Like how do I communicate the answers I don't know, the questions I don't know, right? Like so that and see that's what you're allowing is once we shift from answers to questions and we enter this symbolic world, we get this kind of structural opportunities to say, hey, we get to control like what is going on. Maybe we can transcend ourselves. Maybe we can relate different languages. Maybe we can bridge different things. You see, this whole world opens up, and that's where you're taking us. So that's where that's where some of us want to go. When maybe we're going too fast or whatever, we want to slow down. But what you're doing is you're taking the steps to help us connect our interests and our questions and etc. That's what's happening.
Generally, I was not able to fully follow the conversation just now, but it's also but can we, if there were
continue,
answers,
yeah.
I like these things because I believe these things happen often. I feel like we have all of our very unique ways of thinking, and I don't want to continue just dismiss it. Oh, you were just saying some kind of answers. Can we try to formulate what like the contribution was? Like it was a contribution.
Maybe somebody
some
else
kind of
can.
answer?
Maybe somebody else can. Steph.
I think the question is, how do you express what you don't know, what you don't know that you don't know, or what that you do know that you don't know, a known unknown, to a group of people that potentially have a known on that, on your unknown?
Yeah, so
Or
they have answers for your questions.
They also agree that they know that we don't know it.
What was the latter thing you said? They also have?
That you are expressing an unknown to a group of people that also agree that we know that we don't know it.
Okay.
So we're all unknown,
good,
but we all know that we don't know it.
That's great. That's fine. So that's the question. So how do we essentially come to establish a common question?
Yeah.
By asking the question to see if anyone has answers, and if they don't have answers, we have established a common question.
Yeah. Right.
So
but I think
what
Steph was saying was, suppose you don't even know what you don't know, like, and you're trying to get outside of your box. You're trying to say, look, question. I'm afraid, I'm interested in what. So how do So that's.
But before, like, Steph, is this a thing? So you want to see? Well, because then I don't understand the question anymore of Andrius' version. But did I understand your question? Like, how to establish a common question by asking the question, and if no answers come, you have a common question.
Well, asking a question defines that you know.
Oh, the space. Yes, I do agree. You are limiting the level of hypotheses. Like that can actually
like an example is the war in Iran, right? Like there's so many things we could be thinking about. We're very focused on the things that are obvious to think about, right? Like
I think sorry, what Steph is pointing at, it's a very deep level, and let's go to the free energy principle formalism, because we can also then attach the question. Because now we're going to the arithmetic level behind this method and address the free energy principle directly. We have a generative model, and this generative model we can see as a combination of question and answers. The question is essentially the kind of belief domain, whereas the answers can be seen as the belief distribution over it. It is only that, when we talk about what gets entered into consciousness with the global neuronal workspace, we can say, well, perhaps for now to say it's the highest weight, the highest probability weight. But we can understand our generative models as a series of questions and answers that the organism is asking themselves. Now, we know that we are coupled to a generative process. We know that the generative process perhaps can also be understood as a certain factorization. These are the actual questions we should be asking ourselves. But we, in that sense, from a modeling point of perspective, don't even know what questions should be asking ourselves, which would mimic the same factorial structure of the generative process. So in that sense, there is this very clear mismatch of how do, because essentially the question I believe you are then asking is, how do I make sure that my model structure even aligns with generative process without even talking about what the actual answers are within that within those questions asked? So would that make an answer?
I think so.
Maybe just to add to that, like what the free energy principle, one reason people are excited about it is that it kind of gives this, it kind of addresses that, it kind of gives this freedom. It says, look, you can spend energy exploiting what you already know, or you can expend energy exploring what you don't know, right? Like you can go out and reach out. And that the free energy principle is saying, and the way you balance that is going to be whatever, I guess, maximizes or minimizes the free energy. So you're going to spend some of your resources going beyond what you know, just exploring. So it's saying like the answer to your question is just explore stuff you've never explored before. And
you
that
are
may
answering a different kind of question. You are answering what motivates an agent to essentially structural development. So for now, for energy principle, how it's currently stated is given a fixed model. So the epistemic value is given a fixed model. So fixed questions, the answer the agent is asking themselves, and the epistemic value is derived merely from ambiguity reduction. So we just have certain states, and we like to make this as ambiguous. There are some extensions to the free energy principle, but it doesn't naturally fall out of it, where you can also talk about structure, like a principled structural expansion of the model, the system asking new questions to themselves. This is a crucial part, which I believe is like it doesn't flow naturally from free energy principle. We have to make some kind of extensions, which does really happen in our, I think, in our human brain. Namely, I think, and this is now the neurology, but I think we are continuously asking ourselves different kind of questions, and I think that it's almost entirely done by our anterior cortex, where we're just very flexible, very non-rigid. We can ask ourselves all kind of questions, and these questions seem to be relevant, interesting for understanding reality, the model, I mean, the generative process. Then, you know, it gets a bit more to the posterior cortex in terms of, you know, burden. But that is not present. The epistemic value in the standard vanilla FEP formulation does not consider structured model expansion. So that is, you can call it even a critique of the free energy principle. But perhaps that's my opinion. If anyone wants to say anything there, but that I think I did formulate the whole thing in FEP language. I think that this problem of you don't even know what kind of questions you should ask yourself, because that is a very, because essentially you're just asking what is the factorization of reality, right? What is the kind of questions they ask themselves to even produce this kind of trickle effect to our sensorium? So that's a very fair question. I really enjoyed it. Is it clear? I think that was the big question just now, which was being addressed by Benjamin, I think, which was just the question, how do we know which questions to ask ourselves? Was that the question you were hinging on? And if so, do you feel satisfied with our answer?
Well, we're looking at the bridging principle between the quadrants, yes? So
I don't know. I don't understand that.
I think what Ben said is very important. You see, when he said like we're looking for a bridging principle, all he's doing what I'm encouraging us to do, saying once we have questions, we can start designing investigations. So he's actually proposing an investigation. He's saying, look, we have these 4 quadrants. This is something we could be applying. We could be looking for connections. I'm not saying we need to do this, but I'm saying this is highly intelligent, like, you know, to say, okay, instead of having an answer or pulling out an answer, to say, no, let's not have an answer. Let's not pretend we have an answer, but let's design an investigation. And that's what he's doing. And we can,
I'm curious, Steph, you understood, I think, me, because you're also read in free energy principle. Perhaps you also understood Benjamin. How do our questions relate? Can you formulate that in free energy principle so I can appreciate the question Benjamin is trying to answer?
I think I'm following Benjamin's quadrant question and the navigation between the quadrants better than I understood your explanation of the free energy principle. But you just went fast. I don't know if you went too fast for me to just process
Interesting.
it.
That's good to know. That's good. Thank you for the feedback. That's good to know. Perhaps I should, but this is a good question. We keep it in mind because before we can spend like the remaining 50 minutes with this. But I like this because it seems we have a sort of mismatch. Our ideas transfer. We know what to work on these questions and these answers. That's nice. I like that. But before, yeah, we can discuss this. But let's go move to other people who would like to address a question of their work instead of just going too much into this.
And just to say where we are, what Montijn has done, he's presented these ways of communicating. He's focused on the questioning, communicating the question. He used as a guinea pig the free energy principle. Then he talked about his own personal questions, right? Several were about consciousness and then about morality. And now he's saying, hey, guys, what are the questions that you have? What are you interested? How can you formulate that in terms of questions? So it's a chance for us to present the questions we have, basically. We
Yes.
want.
The alchemists spent a long time trying to turn lead into gold. As it turns out, you can't actually turn lead into gold with a particle accelerator, but the energy required to do that exceeds the yield of the gold, at least
So
in
what's
economic terms.
so what's the question? What the aim of the alchemist? Can we turn lead into gold? That's a question I understand.
So as far as free energy, Tonstoffel, as far as I know,
Constable?
Tonstoffel stands for there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. You
Oh,
can't get
like
nothing from you
yes,
can't make something from nothing.
yes. So what's the question?
We're sharing
Where
questions right now. That's what we're doing
okay.
here.
So I suppose turned into a question is for any endeavor, where is the discernible limit of return, right?
Yes,
I
like a
have the
free.
same question.
Like a least noticeable difference type of thing, right? But where does it reach the point of diminishing returns for any subject, for any
Oh,
endeavor?
you mean like energy always seeps out into the environment somehow? There's no truly closed system. Like that's the answer, right then? Yeah, but I understand the question. Is there a fully closed system? That's essentially like I think the more technical term. But I think that's the kind of question if I
Well,
understand correctly, right?
or I think like one exercise and see what questions does it allows us to do all kinds of exercises and experiments and attempts is just to translate what Ben said. So like the way he said for any endeavor, where is the discernible limit of return, which I didn't quite understand, but basically like at what point does it make sense? Well, at what point are you not going to get any more for your effort? Is that is that a way to say it, Ben, or?
Yes, it is, which is directly from economics, right?
And that's a
Yes,
question,
exactly.
is there a
Diminishing
general
marginal
rule, right?
utility.
Oh, you
Is
mean
there a
that?
general theory, like which tells you at what point you're not going to gain from more effort?
It's the same question that I have. And I think that's the same question as the free energy principle. And I think it's the same question. I'm going to speak for Jerry just a little bit. I think it's the same question that Jerry's working on with Timberfish Technologies. So I think it is a common question.
Ah, because that's like
And
what you want to try to be as efficient, closed system as possible, so that it can produce still the things you want.
Well, efficient in what way? I think Ben and I would, well, I think we would say something about persistence over time doesn't necessarily mean like maximally efficient. It means that there's like, you know, there's excess fat built in. There's excess room for the unknowns to affect and it not lead to catastrophe.
there's
A
a
function
reward out
curve,
there.
like it's back to the graphing, which so on our quadrant, right? This also is almost identical to a Cartesian quadrant for graphing of equations, right? So
A 2x2 quadrant. Yeah.
Right, right.
Just to jump in the Econet homepage, I list all our questions. I try to have this question focus for us. And so what Montain's doing is helping make that practical. But I've been kind of grouping them. And there seem to be 4 natural groups, but one of them is ecology, or systems thinking or whatever, however to call it. But so Ben's questions, Jerry's questions, Steph's questions, they all fit in nicely. And then you can see, oh, there's a whole world view there. But the world view is that somehow there's this external world that we can engage and maybe we can manage or get rewards from or benefit from or etc. That's all kind of something like that's all built in that. Montaigne.
So that's good. I like it. So what's the question you're trying to answer, which leads you to this pattern detection? So what's the main question? So the question is, are there certain patterns between
my question, like,
yes.
Okay, so given that questions are given that we're all working on questions, how can we organize those questions to see better how we could be working together? So the one pattern that came out, and you can see on the homepage, that there seem to be 4 different groupings. There seems to be a structure there. The other groupings are like human life, like what you've been talking about, like the internal, making sense of internal life. The other ones being like math and physics.
But if I understand you correctly, so the question you're trying to answer is, given you have a set of all kind of possible questions, so let's for now just treat them as symbols. Our organization is nothing more than endowing that set with certain events. So it's making certain subsets and a class of questions which say, well, these are related in this way, and therefore they can be grouped together and others like that. That's how I understand you. Is that the question you're trying to answer? What is the best events, or what was the best events to like categorization?
No, I think it's that's not exactly it. I think it's more, given that we want to work alongside each other and with each other by way of our questions. We have questions. We're saying we have questions. We want to work alongside each other. How do we organize ourselves based on our questions? So just a first step is just to say, well, can we group them somehow? Can we list them somehow? So I made a list of about 25 and I grouped them into 4 groups because I said, well, these seem to have a similar worldview. So what Steph and Jerry and Ben are saying is very similar. Whereas like what you and I, let's say, talk about in terms of internal experiences, it's basically a different group. It's like you and I are talking about like what humans experience on the inside. Ecology is like what humans experience on the outside. Math would be if no one experiences, but you have an inside. Physics would be like if no one experiences, but you have an outside. So that's basically a 2x2 quadrant that seems to come up naturally from the questions. And does that help? Well, it just helps to realize like they're kind of in a different world, Ben and Steph and Jerry.
Yes, I think it's good. If I still understand it, you understand that there are all kind of different questions we can have, like a map of questions. And we can dissect this map of questions in certain regions. So these are like the events, and then we can say, well, this quadrant is one big event. So they're like
we can push it further. We can push it further, but it's on the Econet homepage if you see. Yeah.
Yes, if this is correctly, then now I'm interested in your answer. We can answer that perhaps next time. We just say this is the map of all kind of questions we have, and these are different kind of regions, these different kind of subregions, whatever. But and we can talk about that and what we think about it. Is it valid? Is it based on human creativity or whatever? We can talk about it.
Is it helpful? I think that's the important thing. Like, is it helpful?
True.
In a Wolfram physics framework, this is called the Ruliad. This is the space of all possible rules. It's all possible rules. It's not even rules that humans care about. It's like irrelevant rules that are possible.
What is like a rule? Like a update rule.
A rule is a constraint.
Is it an update rule constraint, or like how things can move? So it constrains evolution.
Yeah, if you could go in all directions, at all times, what would limit this direction at this time?
So the rule is like a subset of possible updates, in that sense, of those states.
Yeah.
All right, and then go on. What do you mean with the Ruliad?
Well, then I would just say, out of that space of all possible questions or all possible rules or all possible constraints, what constraints define the thing that's giving rise to this experience? And I would like to know that, because I would like to know, where is my limit of questions? What are the questions that are willing to be asked? I think Andrius, in the way that I interact with Andrius, is that Andrius enters a realm of wider questions that I think mathematics gives an opening to explore that possibility space, that question space. It opens it up. And I don't think that all of those questions are relevant to like, for me, I don't think all search space in that space is like worth the resources.
Yes.
Partly because I just don't have a good compass to navigate it, and Andrius has a better compass to navigate it.
Yes.
So it's less.
Maybe if I can share my screen, and then we're concluding. But for the next time, you can see the questions we
Can I make
have.
one small remark? Just to interpret, I think what Steph says, we are generative models. We have certain preferences, and the model expansions should serve our preferences. And because you have different preferences than Andrius, you also do not feel necessitated to develop a model. You know, these belief distributions, these questions, and then so the answers that can be in regarding to navigate, for example, mathematical life or these big pictures. Just to make sure that
and that Andrius is my model. That I'm not going to get I don't currently have access to a better model than Andrius, so I model Andrius.
Yeah.
Can I show you the screen quickly, and just so that we can, because
it's you have permission, no?
Okay. And so, Montaigne has brought us to this place where I've wanted to go, and we've been all kind of headed in that direction. Here's the main page of Econet, and you can see, like, Montaigne's got a lot of questions here, but a lot of them relate to what I call human life, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But then, like, if you look at Jere, Steph, Ben, they have questions like, how does nature think? What is the best construction of a monetary system for representing energy? Where can I obtain capital for my desalinization invention? These ecological questions, they all relate to what Ben was talking about and Steph was talking about, like, at what point are you not, how do you get the maximum benefit, let's say? So this is like humans dealing with the outside world, and what you and I talk about a lot is like humans dealing with the inside world. And then physics is just the outside world without any humans necessary, and math is like the inside world without any humans necessary either. And so then you just get to kind of split up. Now, this is just very rudimentary, but we could have like a whole universal, sky globe or whatever of these questions. And, but the real point is, how do we work together? How can we benefit from working alongside each other? That's not clear yet. That's the real question when you want a question. How can we benefit from working alongside each other on our questions?
I would say well, I think a map is very nice in that we can first get a feel of the kind of question, how we relate in terms of the questions we talk about. So, for example, with the free entry principle, that question as a preliminary, people can answer that question, and then they can leverage that structure that is similar to my question. And so I would say then, I'm sorry, I'm yapping, but those two questions of FEP in my work, which was about the current state of conscious experience, are united in explanatory dynamics. And so these two questions would remain to the same class regarding explanatory dynamics. So if we understand that we are talking about that class first, we can better understand the question immediately in virtue of understanding the class to which it belongs. So I think that's very nice.
And now what you're doing, which is the whole point of Econet for me, and the whole point of Wonders, you've started to design an investigation. You see, so that's you're saying, look, if we did this, we might be able to figure it out. Like another investigation would be to say, hey, all these people have deepest values, and they relate to their relations with truth, and all their questions are very much related to their deepest values, and that may give a clue, like how do we work together? That's just another investigation. Or just ask people, like, what kind of help do you want? How do you want to work with other people? There's all these ways to investigate that. That's kind of like the
Well,
point.
I think it needs. I think the general structure of doing that, these events between questions, I think these are just meta questions and meta answers. So we also know how that relates in question and answers. All right. Anyone?
So,
I think there's a concluding remark.
Concluding remarks, and then who would
Steph,
give the
you want to say
prayer at
something?
the end?
Steph, you
I
wanted to
have a
say?
question. What would it be called for all of those questions Andrius was just showing as one question?
Mm.
What do we refer to that object as?
The set of all questions. What is the set of all questions? Wouldn't that be something?
Not just a set,
okay.
but
Well,
it's a structure. Like how do all the questions unfold, right? Like that's how I would think of it. They all unfolding from.
Okay.
Is that
Sorry,
satisfying?
I'm just saying. I'm assuming that all of those questions, to me, I interpret it as one question. They are the same question.
I think so. Yeah.
They are similar. So I think in every kind of set endowment we have, there's the empty set and the full set, right? And the full set is just the answer is like, what is the commonality of all these questions? They are questions.
But that's mathematically, like, that's one option. That's just a bag. Set is like a bag. But there could be much richer structure, much more beautiful structure. Like, for example, I think in Wondrous Wisdom, I think like the question that's like God asks, like, is God necessary? And then it just kind of spins out of control into all these questions. So, and that's a different topic. But just
it's
to
very
say,
banal. It's the simplest topology, just the empty set and the full set. So it's not that interesting.
But it's least informative, right?
It's indeed least informative. But I would say that's how I interpret Steph. But if I don't interpret you correctly yet, that's a very good discussion for the next time to make you understand the questions you are actually directing at, and we can understand that.
Well, just a word of praise to Montijn and all of us, for bringing us steps forward. We want more steps forward, and so we've got momentum. We look forward to next time. Last words from anybody. Who would give the concluding prayer? Who's inspired?
I would just say the 9 Billion Names of God by Arthur C. Clarke and the movie The Point by Nilsson, wherein the pointed man says a point in every direction is the same as no point at all.
Pragmatics.
What do you mean by that, Ben?
I think pragmatics. I think pragmatics. Isn't pragmatics?
Yeah, I'm a very pragmatic person.
Yeah,
yes.
I agree. Yes, we should not. The ever doubter should not be the ever hesitator.
So those two things, the Nilsson is very well worth watching. Good movie for children also. But there are a lot of funny things which, if you infer them mathematically, a point, yes. So, but has he got a point? He's got a point there. Okay, so.
This is Leslie Nielsen of the Police Squad. Is that?
No, Nilsson, Nilson. Not Leslie Nielsen.
Okay, I'm sorry.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for the prayer. And
okay.
No, see you guys.
Peace and love, many points for all. Okay.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.